So as you can see, we've completely finished our table for the cabin. It looked a little shiny using that rough sawn plank, so I put a little bit of a patina finish on the top of it, got it oiled all up, and yeah, it's ready to go, ready for the first meal once I get my fireplace done, which is I'm working on today. So our table is a pretty good reproduction of an 18th century settler's cabin table, all built from scrap, as I mentioned before. This not so much. So we're working on the fireplace today, so I'm starting to cut the logs out. I've got 3 more to go for my opening. And in the 17th, 18th, and even into the 19th century, people lived in fear of fire. Where no fire departments. You didn't have homeowners insurance. If it burnt down, you had to rebuild it. So we're going to have a functioning Rumford fireplace in this cabin. It's going to look like a Rumford fireplace. It's going to function like a Rumford fireplace, but we're not going to mess around with the safety hazards of one. So I've constructed this, and this will be the throat. The opening of the fireplace is here. It's going to get set in the opening. And we used all recycled material. So I took an old oil drum I got out of the basement of the house and cut out all the pieces. And my good friend and neighbor, probably the best welder I know, Jim Lucas, he tacked that all up for me. He said he's built some crazy things, but he said this was about the craziest. Anyway, this is the throat, and it's got a curve. Rumford studied fireplaces thoroughly in the late 1700s, late 1780s, 1790s. He studied the airflow, and essentially he built a Ventura, real shallow fireplace, almost to the point that the fire sits in the room. So prior to the Rumford fireplace, just an open box built into a cabin had an efficiency of about 20%. The Rumford had an efficiency of about 40%, which was equivalent to the first cast iron stoves that were being built in that time period. I think Benjamin Franklin had a hand in that. Anyway, this is the throat. The angle irons here will have a real heavy piece of metal that will be our draft. And down here we have, it's called the smoke chamber. So that'll sit above it. And like I say, it's going to look like a Rumford. The outside of it's going to be all fieldstone, which we're collecting. And yeah, I've got 3 more logs to get out of here and some work to do on the base. And then we're going to set this in place. So just a thought about history, and you know, if you've been watching my videos, I have a rather passion for it. 2 sayings I like in construction. The first one is, and you've heard me say it before, is no measurement supersedes a fair line. And the second one, and I like it almost equally as much, is only a rich man can afford poor tools. So if you buy a good quality tool, you're only going to buy it once unless you lose it. So the saw I'm using is made by the Pax company, and it was made in Sheffield, England, still made in Sheffield, England today, almost 250 years later. It was made when they first started to get readily available steel, became available about that time period. So not this particular saw, but a saw made by the same company, dates back to the start of that little kerfuffle down there south of our border. And yeah, and it's still being made today. So I'm going to get back at it and put it to good use. So I've got a hodgepodge of jobs I've got to get done over the course of the next week or 2. I want to get the stops in for the doors and the windows. Got to construct a door. I've got to start collecting the rock for the chimney and the fireplace. And I want to start clearing the area that we fell the logs from. So settlers on the frontier would take the area that they took their material, their raw material for their cabin build, That would become their first garden once cleared. Eventually, it would expand into paddocks for livestock and then ultimately into fields. So I got a lot to do, but it is starting to look a bit like a cabin. What I'm going to do today, though, is have a bit of fun. There's this little stream that runs directly in front or beside the cabin here. It feeds back into a huge wetland back in behind us, and the geese are nesting now. And I find it quite comical to watch their antics as they vie for territory. So I'm going to take a poke back there, take a bit of a break from my jaws before I get at all these sort of labor-intensive things I have to do. As you can see, we're not going to have any problem collecting the raw material or the stone for our chimney build. Hard part for us is going to be getting it from here. This is one of the rock fences on our property back to our building site. But that would pale in comparison to the work of the people who put it here. They cleared these fields on this farm, old farm. The fields were quite small, usually 1 to 3 acres.
quite often perfect squares. And they kept them small because they had to carry the rock by hand at the start, perhaps before they had oxen or horse. And as they acquired those in a stone boat, you'll notice that a lot of the bigger rock is piled on top, where they maybe expand that field and dig out some of the bigger ones that they had to leave because they simply couldn't move them. So, yeah, it's a testament to their fortitude to do this. I'm sure the children would wake up every morning and Dad would say to them, "Guess what we're doing today?" And they'd have a hearty breakfast and get at it. Anyway, we're going to get sorting through this pile of rock, and we've got lots to pick from. And we'll get them thrown out, pick them up, and get them back to our building site.